Edinburgh, UK, home to this spectacular castle that has been besieged over 20 times. It dominates not just the city, but Scotland itself. It has been a royal palace, a prison, and a military fortress. The ancient stones of Edinburgh Castle tell a remarkable story of intrigue, conquest, and royal rivalry. After the restoration of the English monarchy in 1660, Edinburgh Castle remained a valued military prize. In the 18th century, it became an obsession for a movement known as the Jacobites, supporters of Catholic James II of England and later Bonnie Prince Charlie.
It's so symbolic of the Jacobites who want to seize the throne back, who feel that they have the truthful, the real monarch throughout the 18th century. And if they get Edinburgh Castle, they think they'll have got the throne. It's not Holyrood Palace, it's not anywhere else in Scotland, it's Edinburgh Castle they want. And once they've got that, from there they feel they can cement their claim to the throne and govern the whole of Scotland and hopefully get their hands on England.
The Jacobite threat means that actually Scotland is regarded, some places of it, almost like a war zone in the early 18th century.
The Jacobites laid siege to the castle in 1689, but failed to capture it. However, they weren't finished. In 1715, they returned, only for their attack to end in farce.
They almost get it, but the ladder they're using is actually a bit too short, and then then it all fails and they're hanged and flogged, because Edinburgh Castle is so symbolic.
A further unsuccessful Jacobite attack in 1745 proved to be the final siege in the castle's history. As a result of the Jacobite scare, a number of engineers were employed to modernize and repair the castle. New storehouses and barracks were built, as well as more visible battlements, creating the castle we recognize today.
Partly the defences needed to be improved to meet the advances in military technology at the time, but the castle had also suffered very intensive siege in 1689, and so there were a number of repairs that were needed. The defences were 50 to 100 years old in many parts of the site, if not older. They really transformed the defences of Edinburgh Castle, building the Argyll battery, the western defences that cover the lower western side of the site, and they improved parts of the Half Moon battery, the gun bastion there.
As the castle evolved, nothing of the old was wasted.
Any stone in the castle has probably been in 5 or 6 buildings in its life, going back into prehistory. And once the stone was here, and you maybe had buildings that you didn't need anymore, or buildings that had been destroyed by cannon fire, you simply reuse the stone, and there's loads of evidence. So any of these stones have got amazing stories to tell, tremendous time depth.
As well as keeping people out, Edinburgh Castle was built as a place to keep people in. The largest number of prisoners held on Castle Rock was during the Napoleonic Wars of the early 19th century, in which French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte and his allies attempted to conquer Europe. Up to 1,000 French, Spanish, and Dutch prisoners were held here. Attempts to escape were understandable given the conditions they were held in.
The vaults themselves would have been really quite dark and cramped spaces, with the soldiers sleeping on hammocks hung up in lines throughout the vaults. During the Napoleonic Wars, they were really pushed to breaking point. They had such a huge number of prisoners coming into the castle and that were held within the vaults. It would have been really cramped and confined conditions. And it actually inspired escape. We get the impression that there must have been so many soldiers here that perhaps it was quite difficult to keep track of the individuals.
We have evidence of important prisoners undertaking daring escapes from the castle, knotting their bed sheets together and climbing over the rock, hiding in heaps of dung, all sorts of glamorous stories in their attempts to escape. And some did. Some escaped by dressing up and managing to fool the guards, or by sheer bribery.
And unfortunately, in Edinburgh Castle, many parts of the castle were built of sandstone that was rather soft. So that later, when it was converted into a prison, the prisoners could actually dig their way out. At which point it was realised that sandstone was perhaps not the best material